How are you doing? Welcome back. How to stay mindful and compassionate in a world that is completely losing its sanity. And the whole purpose of this video is actually really to give you a question. A question that you have to discover within yourself of what is the truth around this topic. Because I could say is that right now perhaps we are living in the decades of judgments. Some like to say, well, we have a judgment day, but what if we have a whole decade of judgments? Because if you are going to analyze the word compassion, it means the elimination of judgment. So for example, like everybody, like I always say, we are all the center of our own universe, of how we perceive reality, how we perceive our own life. And we all go through a different life experience. So it's always the art to be able to empathize with someone, to really to see the world from the perception of someone else without the judgments of how it actually is or how it should be. So you look at the circumstances of someone, the experience of someone from a very mindful way, and that is really like see it as it is. See it as it is. For example, right now I could do my forest bathing and I could really look at the beauty of this tree and I simply observe the tree in the way it is. That's the whole purpose of becoming mindful. Seeing everything as it is without the judgment. But then of course the question, like how in the earth can you actually do this in a time that is actually going insane? Because we live in a time where we are fighting for what's right and what's wrong about how we should perceiving the world. I can give you countless examples of what's currently going on in the world, but I'm really sure that you can get a very good taste from it by just exploring all these different ways of perceiving reality. Because one say, okay, so we had 2 years of COVID, we had 2 years of pandemic, and some like to say it was the plandemic. What's right, what's wrong? Some were sick, some people lost their families, so chances are there was some kind of disease. And others say, well, you know, it was a propaganda from a plan, from a bigger vision of where we are heading. And then they say, okay, well, those who are talking about the Great Reset or the time of 2030, where the elite has the agenda to really to reshape our society, reshape everything about the global economics, and who want to reduce the global population because of global warming. And you know, it's all fear-mongering messages that we hear. But what is the truth in that? Like right now, what was happening in Europe, Russia against Ukraine, and now all the reporters saying, you know, listen to this, right now it's happening in Europe. White people are right now are being crushed and slaughtered. Well, wait a minute, isn't this going on for decades in other nations around the world, Middle East, Africa, parts of Asia? And yet it was less important. And some like to say, well, you know, but this is Ukraine. This is a major supplier of resources against other parts of Europe. So yeah, this comes closer to us. Okay, so the value of human life is relative to a nation that supplies resources to other parts of that, or because they come from a different ethical background. Is that what we have to see as important? Basically, I could give you endless and countless examples of the insanity that is currently going on, and it has actually it's if you use a little bit of common sense, everything that we see right now, everything is basically being presented as like half of the story. Like it's only being presented of one side of the coin. Listen at mainstream media and it's very clear, it's very obvious that it's basically like half the story. And what is actually really truth about that? And then, you know, how can you still be compassionate about that reality that is being presented to us, like see it as it is. Even being able to empathize with the messages that actually could feel like it has like a sense of gaslighting, that if you do not believe in these messages that are being presented with us, then it is you who has to be ashamed for it, for not taking that in, because everybody else who has a different way of looking at reality, they are being portrayed as labels as the conspiracy thinkers and the false information prophets, because it's just some random guy or lady sitting in their house recording a video, sharing their thoughts about what's currently going on. And of course, if more people believe in that, they say, okay, well, that kind of makes sense, so that could be a truth. So once again, we are creating a them versus us story. That of course is like one of the main recipes for conflicts, all the conflict that is currently going on. And then if we perhaps go even further, even deeper in this rabbit hole of this whole theory, it's not a theory, it's a fact of the Great Reset and where we're heading in 2030. I mean, David Icke has plenty of videos about that, so that's a good thing if you want to explore these areas. Then you could say, all right, that kind of looks evil. It's like those who believe have the right to invade human rights are doing so, and it's being legalized as well through laws, by governments making laws like this is how it is, this is how it's going to be, and if you do not obey, goodbye, toodaloo, you are the one who has to be ashamed and who has to be guilty, which is, of course has been used through propaganda in the media. So how in the earth do you stay mindful and compassionate in that? So as you can imagine, it is no surprise that right now we live in a very challenging time of information warfare. Information warfare where we are constantly being bombarded with information that is on the edge, that is actually like full-blown gaslighting. That is messages that is being broadcasted by those who could say are absolutely narcissistic, sociopath, personality disorders, who believe they have to be in the top and they have to control and dominate the rest of society in their perfect way of seeing how it has to be. So it's a terrifying time, it's a very depressing time. Like many of us say, you know, what's the whole point? Where do I fit in? What do I value? What is my value? Some are right now, okay, so right now we live in a time that doesn't really represent how we were used to living our lives. That right now is completely, and it will be transformed into completely something new, something unfamiliar. So yes, we could disconnect ourselves from right now, this very present moments, by looking at, you know, what's coming up or what could happen and what can happen. You know, we could think about a nuclear war. You know, we could think about like, hey, 2 years pandemic, we were used to using a face mask. What is the next stage? Wearing a gas mask? Terrifying thoughts, but thinking about it, once again, it disconnects you from the present moment. And then once again, if it does happen, how do we deal with that? And that's really the big question. Like, in all this conflicts that we are currently seeing in the world, it is also giving us a reminder of who we really choose to be. When human rights are invaded, then what does it look like to be a real human being? Less extreme examples are, of course, like we are all must be paying the bills. Wars are going on in Europe, Ukraine, which of course is going to be another political and economic effect as well. And who's paying the price? Us, the people. Prices are going up, inflation is going up, and the cost of living is going to be ridiculous. So what must we do? Of course, we think about we must find a way to make more money for ourselves, for our survival. So once again, we can go into this dog-eat-dog way of living in the way we have been living by doing everything conditional. And I'm going to give you practical examples of what exactly is right now is going on, which is quite frustrating as well. For even those who want to be compassionate, who are still having to deal with those who are not, who are less compassionate and are more selfish. Because what I'm talking about is how to become more human in a world that is dehumanizing us. Because what we tend to do is, of course, we can go along with this system that we have been living as and seeing other people as a way of getting our needs met. And whatever we do becomes an act of condition. Like right now we have like salespeople and marketers showing you the ideal perfect lifestyle of how you should be living with the luxuries and the comforts and all of these amazing things, which is once again one side of the story. Once you go deeper and further into this, you're actually, trading one rat race for another. One rat race where perhaps you were living in a corporate job, corporate rat race, and you experience that, wait a minute, this is also an environment where our autonomy is basically being erased in the name of free market capitalist interest by the corporations, under the name of, you know what, if you don't want to do what we tell you to do, you're replaceable. And you have to use your elbows in order to climb this hierarchy. And of course, is this whole story around exploitation. People are being exploited in the name of free market capitalistic interest. Like if you don't do what we tell you to do, goodbye, there's the door. And then you look for alternative ways, and then you maybe come across the whole world of internet marketing and laptop lifestyle and digital nomads and blockchain and crypto, which is another Wild West adventure that some of us feel very connected to, while others say, I don't know about that just yet. If we really want to be true compassions, do we still need to live our lives based on conditions? Like, I do this if you do that for me. If we really want to live in a world where we can be living in more heart-centered ways, do we need all these rules that are being given to us? Those who are on this journey of developing compassion for themselves and for others, it's a very challenging way, because what's the balance between compassion and judgment? Because at the end we still need to use common sense. Because what I wanted to say is that right now we have like salespeople and marketers showing up at every corner of the internet, showing like, hey, I got a deal for you, it's the best since ever, and you're going to be free and passive income, and tomorrow you get 300% ROI. And you say, oh, sounds good, because I don't want to live in this world of exploitation. And that person shows that he wants to become a friend of mine, and I don't have many friends at the moment. I don't have a big social life, and that person actually shows interest in me finally, because it seems like no one else has really an interest in me, and I can be that person I always thought that I had to be and I could become, and this promise really sounds very good for me. And then you go into that and you get betrayed. You lose your money, you lose your hope, you lose a sense of self, and once again of your autonomy and authenticity. So right now, what is the judgment? What's the balance between the judgment and the compassion? Because too much compassion, like, yeah, I see where you're at, I believe you, all are good, and I can totally empathize with you, but at the same time that person has not the same interest and intentions. Like, you have as a heart-centered, intuitive individual wanting to become a more human version of yourself, let's call it for that, I don't have another word for it, that wants to lead with compassion. So what's the balance that we need to have right now? Like, what is acceptable and what is not? What does need a proper judgment of using common sense? Of what is the boundary that we are giving ourselves, of how we actually believe this is the most human way of living our life, and what is not. And those crossing that line, those crossing that boundary, how should they be judged? It's the question. I'm going to give you a question. What are you going to do with it? I'm very curious. Simply drop a comment below and feel free to share this message. Because I do recognize, like, wait a minute, perhaps right now we are in a very crucial point of human history where we get presented so many ways of how we could perceive reality. Like, what kind of reality do we want to perceive? And what kind of world do we want to create for ourselves? And those who resonate with that way of living, how can we unite? How can we unite? Without creating this ideology of right and wrong, of we are right and those who are wrong, so that should be fought against. But still being able to show compassion with a healthy boundary. Like, okay, I could see your point of views. Good luck. This is what I believe for myself. And this is what I continue to practice. We don't have to become always like in this resistance mode. Like, hey, what I see you're doing is wrong. And my job, my purpose is going to prove my rights against your wrongness. And that becomes my job, that becomes my purpose. Showing everybody who's wrong. So I can show my rights. Because you can be right and you can be poor. Not just financially, but also spiritually, mentally, emotionally. By constantly going into the resistance of proving everybody their wrongingness. So I'm going to leave it with this one. And how do you stay mindful and compassionate? I would say, be mindful. Look at what currently is going on in your life. That's it. Because the only corner of our own universe that we can change is, of course, our own inner world. Like, what kind of version do we really want to become? That feels right for us. Is get rid of all the distractions in order for you to realign with your own inner voice, your own inner guidance. Who do you really want to become? That's it. Take care for now. Bye bye.